Good afternoon. Welcome to session 2 of the Forum on Agricultural Trade with China. We will hear from 2 keynote speakers and then from a panel on agricultural trade opportunities. But first, I am now pleased to introduce Mr. Matt Murray. Mr. Murray previously served as the Economic Minister Counselor at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. So he is well acquainted with U.S. China agricultural trade. Welcome, Deputy Assistant Secretary Murray.
Thank you to the U.S. Asia Institute for hosting this event and for the opportunity to set the stage for this session. It's an honor to be able to speak directly with you all, and most especially American farmers, ranchers, and agricultural producers. I have great memories of time spent on farms in Maryland and Pennsylvania growing up, and I have always appreciated any opportunity during my career at the State Department to advocate on behalf of the U.S. agricultural community. As Secretary of State Blinken has noted, we need to ensure at the State Department that we connect our work to the needs and aspirations of the American people. In making these connections, the Biden-Harris administration starts by asking a few simple questions. What will foreign policy mean for American farmers, ranchers, and workers and their families? What do we need to do around the world to make us stronger here at home? And what do we need to do at home to make us stronger in the world? We can't begin to answer these questions without considering the U.S. agricultural community and its vital role in job creation, food security, and the sector's contribution to economic growth and shared prosperity. To put this in context, I want to offer an overview of U.S. foreign policy now that we are a little over 3 months into a new administration. The Interim National Security Strategic Guidance, which was released in early March, establishes priorities and outlines initiatives to achieve results. The strategy focuses on 3 key objectives. First, defending and nurturing the underlying sources of American strength, including our people, our economy, our national defense, and our democracy at home. Second, leading and sustaining a stable and open international system underwritten by strong democratic alliances, partnerships, multilateral institutions, and rules. And third, promoting a favorable distribution of power to deter and prevent adversaries from directly threatening the United States and our allies, inhibiting access to the global commons, or dominating key regions. In the context of today's seminar on U.S. China agricultural trade, therefore, I'll focus my remarks on U.S. China relations and explain how the Economic and Business Affairs Bureau, where I currently serve, and the State Department more broadly, helps advance U.S. agricultural interests. The U.S.-China relationship is complex. As Secretary Blinken recently said, our relationship with the PRC will be competitive when it should be, collaborative when it can be, and adversarial when it must be. We compete with the PRC using the core sources of our strength, including our values and the American people's boundless capacity for innovation and entrepreneurship. These efforts extend to helping American firms, companies, farmers, and workers win, and win fairly, against their competitors. Strengthened agricultural trade benefits both the United States and China. Simply put, American farmers, ranchers, and agricultural innovators are the most productive in the world. China's own economic advances and improving standard of living have led to high demand for safe, high-quality food for its people and feed for its livestock. Having previously served in multiple economic policy roles at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, I have grown to appreciate firsthand over the years how important U.S. China agricultural trade is to both of our countries. This virtual conference has its home in Nebraska, and the top 3 agricultural exports in the Cornhusker State, as you know, are soybeans, beef, and corn. Nebraska soybeans have been exported to China for years, but 2020 saw a significant increase in the amount of beef and corn exported to China for the first time in many years, amid increased demand and greater market access for U.S. products. We obviously want to increase U.S. farm exports still further, though, so we will continue to address trade barriers and seek to advance necessary structural reforms. The Biden-Harris administration is engaged in a review of the policies in place to respond to China's coercive and unfair trade practices. A comprehensive strategy to confront the PRC challenge will be formulated based on that review. In areas where we believe the PRC seeks unfair advantages, behaves aggressively or coercively, or undermines the rules and values at the heart of an open and stable international system, we will advocate on behalf of U.S. political and economic interests and will uphold the ideals, principles, and rules that have underscored global growth and prosperity for decades. President Biden defines America's economic interests according to the prosperity of its working families. He insists that a successful economic recovery must be grounded in equitable and inclusive growth, ensuring American prosperity underpins everything that we do in the Economic and Business Affairs Bureau and the State Department as a whole. American farmers, ranchers, and agricultural developers are the most productive in the world, in part due to their willingness to adopt the latest agricultural innovations and technologies, including agricultural biotechnology. They can't get their products to markets, however, without a transparent, predictable international trading system based on rules and science. The State Department therefore works very closely with the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to uphold the role of science and fair trading rules in international fora, including the World Trade Organization. Efforts also are underway to reform the World Trade Organization so that it functions to support both American jobs and global values. Our work doesn't stop there, though. We also encourage our trading partners to adopt approaches that reflect sound science, principally by developing regulatory frameworks that are evidence-based and risk-proportionate. Enhanced access to markets increases developer confidence and encourages innovation to respond to environmental challenges, enhance U.S. farmer livelihoods, and improve food security amidst global crises. In this vein, we would welcome the Chinese government's cooperation on issues such as climate change, global health security, and other areas where our interests align. President Biden has challenged all of us to lead the world on an ambitious climate agenda, and we know we cannot address the climate crisis without ambitious action from China. At home and around the world, agriculture has significant untapped potential to build sustainable food systems that contribute to climate mitigation and adaptation. Finally, as Secretary Blinken has noted, our trade policies will need to answer very clearly how they will grow the American middle class, create new and better jobs, and benefit all Americans. We cannot achieve the Secretary's goal without input and feedback from the American agricultural community. I look forward to hearing from you on the best way forward as we refine our approaches in developing and implementing our policy toward China. Thank you very much, and best wishes for a great conference.
Many thanks, Deputy Assistant Secretary Murray. We really appreciate you. Now we will hear from Nebraska's esteemed Speaker of the Legislature, Mike Hilgers. Speaker Hilgers has worked on agricultural issues in the state legislature since 2017 and was elected as Speaker this year. Welcome, Speaker Hilgers.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As just mentioned, my name is Mike Hilgers, State Senator in Nebraska, and currently serving as Speaker of the Nebraska Legislature. I am joining you virtually today, obviously, but from the state capitol, as we are currently in the midst of our legislative session here in the Nebraska unicameral, and behind me, about 20 feet or so, we're in the middle of debate on a particular issue related to school funding, in fact. And so I'm here virtually, and I appreciate the opportunity to both attend and to attend virtually. I want to thank Andy Abood and Las Vegas Sands and the U.S. Asia Institute for hosting this critical forum on agricultural trade with China, and for allowing me to be present here to share just a couple of remarks with you today. As you know, agriculture is the #1 industry here in Nebraska, with nearly 1 in 4 jobs tied to agriculture. Few state economies around the country, in fact, are as prominently tied to agriculture as Nebraska's is, with over $6.2 billion in ag exports in 2019. The success of our state here in Nebraska is tied directly to the strong trade relationships our ag producers have in the global economy. When ag exports are strong, the entire state economy succeeds. Nebraska's ag sector also serves as a buffer against the severe economic hardships endured by many other states during this recent COVID-19 pandemic. Nebraska's relationship with China is especially important, as China is consistently one of the top 3 customers for Nebraska products. Over the last year, the need for continued cooperation and coordination between the United States and China has become even more apparent. China is both America's competitor and trading partner. While we may not agree on everything, the United States and Chinese government officials and companies continue to pursue common ground and opportunities to work together. This forum is an excellent opening opportunity to long-term relationship development and understanding between United States and Chinese officials and businesses. I appreciate the opportunity to listen and learn from the stakeholders presenting today. I look forward to future interactions to improve our relationship, which will benefit both Nebraska and China. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Speaker Hilgers, for joining us today. Now we welcome Jay Rempe, who serves as the Senior Economist for the Nebraska Farm Bureau. Jay will provide an overview of trade between China and Nebraska and moderate a discussion on agricultural trade opportunities. I'll turn it over to you now, Jay.
Thank you very much, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for allowing me to participate in this forum, in this discussion today. I also want to thank the U.S. Asia Institute for hosting the forum, and as well as the Sands Corporation for sponsoring this event. And also, I want to thank you for bringing it to Nebraska and to Lincoln. Nebraska is the 6th largest state in terms of our ag exports from the United States. And so I think it's appropriate to have this event here in Lincoln. As Rachel said, my name is Jay Rempe. I am seeing the rest of issues that are impacting the bottom lines of our producers across the state. And obviously trade is critical to that, especially trade with China. If you look at Nebraska's agricultural receipts and our exports each year, the value of exports is about 30% of the, you want me to use that? All right. So we can tell the governor he wasn't the only one that had issues with his mic. So the value of exports from Nebraska makes up about 30% of the agricultural receipts. So it's critical. And I want to start this session as we think about opportunities in trade between the United States and China. I want to just read some headlines that occurred over the last few weeks in terms of trade between agriculture trade between China and the U.S. First one, China demand could create mini super cycle. For U.S. farmers, China is back and bigger than ever. World's top crop trader says Chinese buying has more to go. So these are headlines from the last 2 or 3 months describing what's occurred with the Chinese purchases, and obviously we've seen commodity markets react to that. Now I want to go back just a bit further and look at late 2019 and 2020. What is the toll of trade wars on U.S. agriculture? Trade war impact on agriculture exports was greater than it appears. trade war continues to weigh on U.S. agriculture. So what a difference a year makes, and then what a difference in just the short amount of time for farmers and producers to try to react to different kinds of markets. And that's what trade brings. It brings risks, it brings complications, it's a complex topic. And particularly when you mix in the United States and China with the different values of, as we talked about, the different trading systems and practices and businesses, it's very complicated. So today what we're going to try to do is bring to you more of the private sector, the producer viewpoint on some of these issues. We'll probably cover a lot of the same issues as the previous panel, but want to talk a little bit about, these are the people that are on the ground that are trying to make those sales into markets across the seas. And I'm pleased to have with me today a very good panel. I want to first introduce the panel, and then we'll open it up to them to say some opening comments and some perspectives on China's trade. First with me on the podium here on the stage is Kelly Brunkhorst. Kelly is Executive Director of the Nebraska Corn Growers. He's based here in Lincoln. And then also virtually we have Kent Bacchus. Kent is a Senior Director of International Trade and Market Access for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And I believe Kent is based out of Washington, D.C. We are pleased to also have with us Raymond Chow. Raymond is the Executive Director or Executive Vice President of Bank of China USA and a representative for China General Chamber of Commerce. And lastly, we hope to have with us Bobby Ritchie. Bobby is in Beijing. He is the Minister Counselor of Agricultural Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. So we have quite the panel. First, I want to ask our members of our panel to visit a little bit about a brief background on themselves, your organization, and any thoughts that you might have, overview of agriculture trade with China. And we'll start, Kelly, we'll start with you since you're right up here with me.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it, Jay, and appreciate again the opportunity to join the panel and speak on the opportunities. I think it's a great word or a great theme we've heard consistently throughout many of the speakers. As Jay mentioned, I'm Kelly Brunkhorst. I serve as the Executive Director for the Nebraska Corn Growers Association and the Nebraska Corn Board. So serve both the checkoff, which is interested in market development, research and promotion activities, but also work on behalf of the association and their membership base in policy and advocacy work. Trade is a great opportunity, and China fits right into that opportunity as we look at it. You only have to go back 2 or 3 years and look at where projections are today, and China's world corn imports are going to more than be 4 times greater than what they were. If you look back 2 or 3 years ago, China was importing more distillers' grains than our second largest customer in Mexico. As you look at the opportunities for China to import ethanol, another value-added opportunity for us, and effectively looking at an E10 policy, we look for that to be great opportunity. So following that theme, Jay, of opportunity, I look forward to continuing that discussion around the opportunities that China has with the U.S. and also some of the challenges we're going to face.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Next, we'll turn to Kent Bacchus. Kent, if you could provide us a little perspective from the beef sector, please.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to join you and thank you for having me. For the cattle industry, we really see China as a great opportunity. Unfortunately, for many years we were banned in China due to the BSE, and it wasn't until 2017 that we started to see that market reopen. We were the top agenda item coming out of the Mar-a-Lago summit between President Trump and President Xi. And in June 2017, we finally got to send the first shipments of beef into China. I was fortunate enough to go to Beijing and be there to celebrate that, along with our past president, Craig Uden, who is a Nebraska cattleman. And so, we were excited, very optimistic about finally having an opportunity to make some headway in that market, but we still face a lot of restrictions and really, weren't able to reach our potential. We were very, very happy to see the phase 1 agreement implemented, because it really removed a lot of those non-tariff barriers that prevented us from capitalizing on that strong demand in China. I'm happy to report that in 2020, we ended the year with $310 million in sales. That's a pretty strong first year. But just through February, we've already exported 16,500 metric tons of beef, totaling about 124 million. And we just got the March numbers today. And So far, just in March, we exported 14,000 metric tons, almost double what we've already exported. So we are seeing tremendous growth in the Chinese market, and it really is a testament to what strong trade policies, what science-based trade can do to really benefit both cattle producers and consumers. And so we look forward to really developing that market and seeing all the opportunities there ahead of us. Again, happy to join you today and look forward to taking your questions.
All right, thank you very much, Kent. And now I'd like to ask Raymond Chow. Raymond, would you like to offer a few comments on your role in trade between China and the United States?
Sure. Thank you, Jay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raymond Chow, Executive Vice President of Bank of China, based in USA. First, I have to appreciate the opportunity for me to attend the forum on behalf of China General Chamber of Commerce in the US. The General Chamber is a nonprofit, non-governmental organization with about 1,500 member companies, representing Chinese enterprises in the US and also some American companies doing business in China. As of June 2020, just the Chinese member companies have cumulatively invested over 124 billion US dollars and created more than 220,000 jobs in the US market. Many of our member companies are also active participants in the U.S. China agriculture trade, such as the COFCO and Jiusan Group from China. Even Bank of China USA also actively provides customized different financing products, service to both U.S. and Chinese agriculture companies, even including the global top green traders and the suppliers, to facilitate their production and trade of agricultural products. Today, I just want to take this short opportunity to share some of my viewpoints and expectations on the U.S.-China agriculture trade. Mr. Deputy Assistant Secretary just mentioned, U.S.-China relations is complex, but as we all know, the economies of China and the U.S. are very complementary and have the potential for further growth despite the already large volume of trade. The expansion of agriculture cooperation is a good example for mutual benefits. On one hand, China has ample room for growth in food consumption. It has a population of 1.4 billion people and an urbanization rate of over 60%. Moreover, China's demand for global agricultural farm products has grown rapidly in recent years due to the stringent domestic food safety laws, higher expectations for food abundance and quality as consumers. On the other hand, the US is a vast country with a well-developed livestock industry and food processing industry. The US also is the world's largest exporter and the producer of the grain products. The trade war between the last US administration and China has undermined the two countries' normal trade relations of the past, seriously harming the common interest of consumers and producers, causing the prices of US agricultural products such as soybeans, corn, sorghum to fall to their lowest points in a decade. And the export of US agricultural products to China declined at an extremely rapid speed. Soybean export is the most representative case, as it fell to $2 billion export in 2019 to China from an average of about $11 billion a year to China before the trade war, which is a drop of more than 80%. After the signing of the trade war phase one trade agreement between China and the US last year, January last year, the agriculture trade between the two countries rebounded significantly. And the scale of China's purchase of US agriculture products reached to a record high. According to the data from USDA, US agriculture exports to China rose to 55.5 million metric tons in 2020, accounting for about 25% of the total US agriculture exports, while China's imports of agriculture products from the U.S. in 2020 was 163 billion RMB yuan. It is an increase of 67% over 2019. Okay, this is according to the data released by the China customers. Looking forward, there are a lot of remarkable potentials for the structural and sustainable agricultural cooperation between China and the U.S. as the stabilizer and the driver of the world's economic recovery. Especially in the current global pandemic timing, China and the U.S. have responsibilities to pay more attention to the importance of expanding trade, investment, personnel exchanges between the two countries. Among them, agricultural trade will be one of the most promising areas for achieving win-win cooperation. So we ask all of us to work together to be realistic, to be practical, and to do more for the common good for consumers and farmers in both countries. So this is my remarks. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Appreciate that. And last, Bobby Ritchie coming to us from Beijing. Welcome to Nebraska, Bobby.
Jay, thank you very much. I had the pleasure of joining you all about 4 years ago and at Governor Ricketts Ag Summit, and it's great to be back even virtually from Beijing to see you all. The Foreign Agricultural Service here in Beijing and around the world is on the ground to represent U.S. farmers and ranchers. I have colleagues in our 4 consulates that are on the front lines and introducing U.S. exporters to Chinese importers. And we are pleased to see that our exports across the board have rebounded over the past 12 months. However, China can do a lot more to meet its agricultural commitments under the Phase 1 trade agreement and expand products that have yet to regain their market share here in China. Secretary Vilsack reminded China's Minister of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, Minister Tang, about some of those issues recently when they spoke, but they also shared common goals in tackling climate change and how agriculture can address some of those priorities, as well as the opportunities that exist in the future for cooperation and engagement. U.S. agriculture has been on the ground, and U.S. farmers and ranchers have been on the ground in China since the mid-1980s when I visited here. At that time, U.S. Grains Council, American Soybean Association, now Soybean Export Council, and U.S. Wheat Associates had representatives then building relationships, building markets. And the U.S. agriculture community remains committed to China as a market. We have over 40 agricultural producer groups represented here. And we look forward to continuing to build upon the demand and the success that we have made in the past year when agricultural exports and related products reached almost $30 billion, a level and making it our largest export market. However, there remains untapped potential in China with 1.4 billion people. There are 600 million consumers looking for safe, competitively priced food products, and they many times will turn to products sourced from the United States. We want to work with our Chinese customers to ensure that those products continue to move here, and work closely with our colleagues from the Food Safety Inspection Service and the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service here in Beijing to address those problems that occur on a daily basis, but also tackle the remaining market access concerns that we have. So Jay, thank you for hosting this morning, and I look forward to the questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate that. And I should have mentioned before we got started, we certainly want to encourage questions from the audience. If you're online, please submit those questions, or here in the audience, if you've got any questions, let us know. So I want to take the Phase 1 agreement a little further. That was mentioned both by Bobby and Raymond. And I want to ask each of our panelists here, in terms of Phase 1, we're in the second year of that. What do you see coming in the future? Are we heading towards another Phase 2 agreement between the two countries, or absent of phase two, where do you see the trade opportunities, I guess, aligning in the next few years between the countries? And Bobby, I'll throw it right back to you and let you handle that one first.
You didn't even buy me breakfast today, and you're going to start off right there. The Biden-Harris administration is going through a thorough review of our trade policy with China. It's a complicated relationship that involves many aspects of our national security and our economy. China, I think we all can appreciate the important role China plays as a customer, but China remains a competitive threat around the world in many areas. So I know y'all are going to be hearing from Jason Halfmeister later this afternoon, and I'm sure he'll have a better insight from his perspective in Washington on how that will proceed.
All right, thanks, Bobby. Raymond, your perspective on will there be a phase two or what's next in regard to ag trade between the United States and China?
Talking about the phase one deal, I think I have to mention, the execution, implementation briefly. After the phase one deal was signed in January 2020, unfortunately, before the two sides started to do the implementation work, the COVID-19 pandemic broke out. So activities were down right to the disappointing level throughout the summer. However, China's purchase of U.S. agricultural products were kicked in the high gear by the fall and still finished the year strong. At the end, China achieved 67% of its purchase target of 2020. So in the past year, all the major economies have gone through very difficult times. All the countries, including the United States, GDP dropped by 3.5% in 2020. So the extent of the damage of the pandemic to the global economy, I think, is very big, huge. This pandemic, hit both sides of the supply and the demand. It has a big negative impact to the implementation of the trade deal, of the phase one trade deal. However, China took the lead in stabilizing the situation, curbing the pandemic and recovering its economy, played a role of major contributor to the global economic recovery. At the same time, China, I think, done a lot to formally implement the phase one trade deal through the close communications with the U.S. government. Not only did China refuse to trigger the force of majeure clause in the phase one deal, on the contrary, China has been increasing and accelerating the implementation of the agreement since the summer of 2020. That's why it still reached 67% completion of the purchase target. It was a remarkable achievement. China's efforts, I think, have created a fundamental for further economic and trade interaction between China and the U.S. in the future. So their conclusion of phase one deal is a good example of the high degree complementary between the U.S. and China, which satisfies the interests of both countries. And this concept, I think, this concept should also serve as a principle for the future phase two or even next step discussion or negotiations. Both governments should continue to engage in mutually beneficial communications. So that's my comments about phase one and the next step negotiation.
Okay, thank you, Raymond. Kent, any thoughts or comments on this question?
Yeah, I think when you look at phase one, obviously for the cattle sector, we saw a lot of tremendous developments there. Removing some significant non-tariff barriers that in many ways had been non-science-based barriers, removing the hormone ban, lifting the BSE restriction, recognizing FSIS as the approval of all of our packing facilities to be able to export to China. These are tremendous steps, and while they may not get a lot of attention, a lot's focused on purchase agreements and things like that. For us, it was addressing these non-tariff trade barriers and really seeing China step forward to try to embrace more science-based standards. I think for us moving forward, we see ourselves as a a good trade partner. And China obviously is going to have some food security issues. They are the largest importer of a lot of items, including beef. And as their protein sector, their domestic production continues to recover, they're going to need safe and reliable imports from countries like the United States. And I think that when you look at not only the food safety and animal health track record that we have in the United States, we also have a very strong sustainability record. And I think as that climate message starts to resonate with more global consumers, I think China is going to start to look at that too and see how the United States is a leader in all of these areas. And for that, I think that even if there's not technically a phase two, there's always evolving trade discussions. When you have two major economies like us, we have to work together, or we have mutual benefits that rely on that. And so I think that there's a strong, not only financial incentive, but really diplomatic incentive to keep those relationships strong, to look for these victories, to look for these win-win situations. And I think, the cattle industry is a great example of how we can have a successful bilateral relationship when we remove a lot of the politics and really get down to science and rules and do what's best for producers and consumers in both countries.
Thank you, Kent. Kelly, any thoughts?
Well, I'll follow on what Kent was saying. I think there's some non-tariff barriers that we continue to need to be addressed. One of them being biotech approvals. It's those innovations and technologies that have allowed American farmers to grow and prosper and be much more sustainable and efficient. And sometimes science is not following, or science isn't being followed in regards to addressing those non-tariff barriers. There's some great opportunity, and China's taken some steps in that regards, approval of some of those biotech traits, and we need to continue to move on from that. Their diets as another opportunity. So we look at phase one as being a great foundation, and if there's continued discussion on some of these non-tariff barriers from a lot of our different agricultural industries, phase two could be a growth upon that.
We've got a question from the audience here, and I think I'll address it to Kent and Kelly, because it talks about, as China grows economically, how will that change its demand for our U.S. products? And then what do we in U.S. agriculture have to do to position ourselves to respond to that? So Kelly, since you had a little chance to see that on the monitor, I'll let you go first, and then we'll get Kent a crack at that.
Within the corn industry, when we looked at phase one, a lot of the discussion that we had is we knew that there was going to be a great opportunity initially for our value-added red meat industry, and Kent can definitely talk to that more so than what I can. And so as we look at economies growing and people moving up in the middle class, obviously the disposable income increases, and that creates some opportunities for the red meat industry. Nebraska is very, very well positioned to be able to service that market. And we also look at it as disposable income in regards to cars and vehicles and gasohol. And as we look at our industry, looking at value-added opportunities for ethanol. And so as we see those economies rising, I think that continues to provide the opportunities for us to fulfill, or China to fulfill phase one, and again, feed into those value-added market opportunities that a rise in disposable income provides.
Kent, any thought from your standpoint of how U.S. agriculture needs to position itself to meet those demands in China?
Well, I think for us in the cattle industry specifically, China presents a great opportunity for us to maximize our overall carcass value. Far too often people make the assumption that we're exporting and importing the same things, and that's not necessarily the truth. For us, China presents a great market for a lot of cuts that Americans, aren't willing to pay a premium for. Short plate, brisket, offal, all these things are very popular in Chinese cuisine, and China is a great opportunity for there. So it really gives us a chance to maximize that overall value. I think that just given the size of that growing consumer base, I think it's clear that China is going to be one of our top export markets in the very near future. And so we're very excited about what that opportunity holds. We also know that, we provide a very safe, a very trusted product that is something that Chinese consumers value and they're willing to pay for. And so we look forward to developing that market, developing those supply chains, and reaching those customers who want to enjoy that same high quality and sustainable beef that we serve American consumers.
All right, thanks, Kent. We got another question in from the audience that we'll start, and I'll direct it to Raymond. The question it asks about the larger political issues between China and the United States, and can we separate agriculture trade from those larger political issues? And if we can, how do we do that? And I guess I'll add a little bit. Does some of those other political issues make you a little nervous in terms of as we try to set a path for greater trade between the two countries? So Raymond, I'll start with you on that one.
Okay, the U.S. and China, I think that's two big countries and also two big different countries. So there are a lot of differences between these two countries: political system, language, history, culture, ways to do business, many others. But I think I don't think these differences are the problem for the trade business, especially the agricultural products, because the demand is so strong in China. And the major issue still, I believe, still the uncertainties, major risk and uncertainties are still from the policies, from the politicians. So the differences, have been there for many years, but the trade volume, the agriculture trade volume between U.S. and China reached a record high, historical high level in 2012, 13, and 2014. So the business partners got along well. They make self-adjustment and get used to each other, especially to each country's policy and regulations. The major risk of the policy and from the political side. So without the trade war, and also we can see, after the phase one agreement was signed in January 2020, so the trade volume jumped, and China's purchase and U.S. exports to China. So we see a big start in a big jump last year, 2020, and also a big, strong, solid, optimistic start in 2021 already. So even I heard, from different friends, the shipping companies are running out of the cargoes and the containers. Container pricing jumped a few times. So that's all the index, all the indicators shows the trade volume has been, the trade business between China and the U.S. has been moving well without the interruption of the political, from the political side. So I think, from the both sides, the two countries, business leaders understood the situation. But we need to have the government officials, government leaders have the same understanding and to facilitate, to try to provide more help, more facilitation for the U.S. China agricultural product trade to avoid more political interruptions, for let the supply and the demand market fundamentals to principle to play the role. That's my comments. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Raymond. Bobby, any thought on the political tensions between the two countries and how it relates to agriculture trade?
It is a fact that any relationship as complex as that between the United States and China is going to have many dimensions, and our political leadership have to work through those challenges so that we can have a prosperous, productive relationship. I mean, the fact is, many of the problems that were resolved or addressed in the phase one trade agreement had been around for 20 years. I began working with China in 2002 on regulatory affairs around agricultural biotechnology, and we're still working on some of those issues today. So it's important that our Chinese friends and counterparts take seriously the fact that the United States expects our most important agricultural trading partner to live up to its commitments, not only in the phase one agreement, but those at the WTO. My dad, who's a cotton farmer in West Texas, told me one time, I can deal with the risk that Mother Nature brings every night. What I can't deal with is the political risk of a trading partner not living up to its promises. So we have gone a long way in the phase one trade agreement to address some of those long-standing market access issues, whether it's U.S. poultry being not allowed into the Chinese market for 10 years, U.S. beef being locked out of the Chinese market for many years without scientific justification. So I hope, as many of you do, that the progress we have made in the past 12 months is a sign that our Chinese counterparts understand the role of the promises that they make, and that living up to them do have benefits in our trading relationship.
Thanks, Bobby. And for Kent and Kelly, I want to pick up on something what Bobby just said about what his dad said as a cotton farmer in West Texas. And so representing commodity organizations, Kelly, again, the risks that producers face in these kind of agricultural trade situations when you have two countries that have the tensions they do, how much does that play on your mind and the mind of the farmers that you represent?
Oh, it's constant. We get questions consistently calling into our office on this very issue. And it's not just around China, but the trade in general of the risks associated with it and how a new administration looks and perceives trade from their perspective, not only within the U.S., but in the various countries, China, as we're talking about here. I think phase one can be an example of kind of pulling out some of that other political issues and just focusing in on trade from an agricultural perspective. We've seen it with other countries too. So there is an opportunity there. It's our farmers believe that as we look ahead at expansion of demand, it's going to happen around the world. And so trade and the risks that are associated with trade are going to continue to be more and more prominent as we move ahead. Kent, any thoughts from you from a standpoint of a beef producer?
Yeah, I know for our producers, they're very, I would say, they pay a lot of close attention to what's happening, not only here in Washington, but around the world. So we get a lot of those questions too. Unfortunately, when trade and when agriculture are politicized, we are unfortunately some of the indirect casualties there. And unfortunately, that's not good for producers. That's not good for consumers in either country. And, our focus has always been, let's focus on the terms of trade. Let's focus on science. Let's remove all of the other variables that are out there and let's get to the facts. Let's get to evidence. Let's have risk assessments and peer-reviewed science drive the debates, drive the discussion, and really bring more objectivity into trade policy. I've heard some of the previous speakers talk about predictability and having stable access. We kind of talk sometimes that the most successful trade relationship is a very boring and predictable one, and that allows us to capitalize on consumer demand, and it shows that there's trust between both sides. We stand by our product. We are very proud of our production practices, very proud of the cattle we raise and the beef we put on tables. And we just want that opportunity to continue to share that with customers in China and other places. And we can't do that unless we have rules-based, science-based trade that gives us the access to those markets. So if we can keep politics out of it, I know that sometimes that's a heavy lift, but that's always a successful solution to all of our issues.
All right, thanks, Kent. We've got just under 10 minutes, I guess, left in our panel discussion here. So another question from the audience. Earlier in the day, Secretary Albright noted how ag trade also serves as a key foundation for the overall relationship between China and the U.S. And the question is, how can that be better communicated to the policymakers that actually have to sit down and engage with China and make some of these decisions? So I'll kind of throw that out to any panelists that want to jump in to start.
I'll certainly take a stab at it, Jay. As we look at it, to me, agricultural trade comes down to one thing, and that's food, fuel, and fiber. I mean, that's what keeps our economy, from our perspective, running, but it's also a demand that people around the world need on a daily basis. And so agricultural trade can provide all three of those from a food, fuel, and fiber perspective.
Thanks, Kelly. Anybody else want to jump in on that question? All right, I don't think, Kelly, you did such a good job there. Another question, and this one is directed to Kelly and Kent as producer reps. What does the U.S. government do well in promoting ag trade with China? And are there additional steps that federal agencies can take as they pursue strategies? So Kent, I'll let you tackle that one first.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And we think that our government does a fantastic job helping, first of all, remove trade barriers, and we help them identify areas where we are having issues. And I think our government has done a great job, not only at the negotiating table, but also providing technical advice and technical support. Because sometimes our production practices are so advanced that it's hard to communicate that to other countries. I know in our conversations with China, that took over a decade to really explain the complexity of U.S. beef production and the safety behind it. But I think our government does a fantastic job, not only working with other governments to open those markets, but also working with our different promotion agencies and helping establish our presence in those markets. So really, I think we've got a good system in place that helps complement efforts between industry and government, and really opens those doors to further competition.
Kelly.
Well, I think one of the areas is it starts with engagement. The current administration and the previous administration were both very good at reaching out to a number of our promotional agencies, U.S. Grains Council, U.S. Meat Export Federation, NCGA, NCBA, and many others in regards to what are some of the top of mind issues in dealing with and working with China. Another way is in regards to just financial support. The U.S. government, through foreign market development activities and funding, market access programs, there's a number of financial opportunities that they support a number of our international promotional agencies or cooperators around the world. So they do a number of great, they take a number of great steps in promoting agricultural trade. But then it goes beyond that and just direct contact. You talked about Bobby in Beijing already. Great people around the world that are day in and day out working on our behalf, opening up the opportunities and addressing some of the trade issues that evolve.
Thanks, Kelly. Bobby, I want to take the same question, but I want to twist it a little bit from your perspective. And that is, as you're over there representing us as producers in China, what can we do as producers or as Nebraskans or as folks here in the United States to assist you with what you do in trying to promote ag trade with China?
One of the most important relationships that any agricultural affairs officer has representing U.S. farmers and ranchers around the world is the role that y'all play in communicating the commitment that family farms across the United States, across Nebraska have to producing safe, nutritious, competitively priced food, and telling that story directly to the consumer, whether it's in Europe or here in China. While for the past year, we've not been able to welcome anyone in person, the virtual platforms of that family farm in Western Nebraska telling the consumer around the world the care and the importance and the investment that that family makes in producing that safe, affordable food product very much resonates and makes it a very personal story and a story that consumers remember when they go into the supermarket. And often that takes the political edge off some of the other issues that we're dealing with far too often on the front page of newspapers. So important issues nonetheless. So telling that family story and finding ways to do it even in today's environment where folks aren't able to get on an airplane and come and do it personally remains one of the most important things that farmers and ranchers can do in helping communicate the importance of agricultural trade and the safety of their products.
Thanks, Bobby. We have less than 5 minutes left now. I just want to ask a quick question of each of the panelists. As you look to the future and you think about the future of agricultural trade between U.S. and China, I'm just curious what you foresee, what you see in the relationship, and what do you see happening in the next few years and in a short amount of time we have left. And Raymond, I'll start with you since we didn't get you a chance to answer that last question.
I think overall, I'm very optimistic about the U.S. China agriculture product trade. From the beginning of this year, already shows a very strong jump. So for the next, I think that's predictable. For the next 3+ years, we can see, I believe the U.S. government will continue to promote the U.S. agriculture products to the global market, especially to China market. And also we'll continue to negotiate with the Chinese government for mutual beneficial arrangement or further deal arrangement. For the U.S. companies, I think as advice from a financial institutions standing point, our companies can continue to learn, update the China's policy regulations. Especially, I heard they recently simplified the inspection procedure. So for those kind of stuff, we should keep following up. And also for China's distribution channels, the online distribution channel is very advanced. I think Bobby might have better understanding experience for the distribution. We tried to bridge some U.S. farm beef producers with some major Chinese online sales platform to sell the U.S. beef to the Chinese market directly. So the demand is still very strong because of the quality and the reputation. So same for other agricultural products. So I'm very optimistic for the next few years. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Raymond. Kent, your thoughts?
For us in the U.S. cattle industry, we're very excited about the opportunity that having this relationship with China presents. And quite frankly, we have not even begun to scratch the surface of the potential of that market. There is so much opportunity to educate and to develop trust with Chinese consumers. And so sometimes that's hard for our producers to understand that, the cattle that they're getting up and taking care of in the middle of the night, someday that they could be, on a table in China with people they've never met. But with just the speed of commerce, the growth in online sales, and just the strong demand for high quality products, we're well positioned to capitalize on that demand. And we look forward to building that strong relationship with Chinese consumers over the next few years.
Thank you, Kent. Bobby.
Nothing is static in the world of trade, and regulations move on. Production practices change, and I think it's incumbent upon us all in the government sphere and working with our private sector partners to remember that we can't rest on yesterday's agreement, that work continues. Hard work needs to be done on addressing today's issues that will pay dividends in the future. China continues to face a devastating outbreak of African swine fever. The weather last fall was not the best in the Northeast and significantly reducing corn production. So China has an important production year coming up in addressing some of the issues facing the farmers here. How that plays out will in large part determine how our agricultural relationship moves forward. But on the other side, China is rolling out there is still hard work that China needs to do in the Phase 1 agreement to live up to the promises it made and signed on to over 12 months ago, whether that's in DDGs or ethanol, agricultural biotechnology, having a policy that's transparent and timely and risk-based. But we'll be facing other hurdles that the two governments need to face and need to address productively. For example, 2 weeks ago, China announced a new regulation that will require all food manufacturing facilities overseas to be registered as of January 1 to remain eligible to export to China. While some of our agricultural exports, such as those regulated by the Food Safety Inspection Service or FDA, might already qualify, there's a huge number of small and medium-sized companies that will need to have that issue addressed in a way that is straightforward for them to remain in the market. So problems remain, but with good faith on both sides and addressing the concerns of the other, I fully expect that the growth we have seen in the past year will remain. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate today, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Bobby. It says we have to wrap it up. Kelly, any 10 or 15 seconds worth from your perspective?
I think opportunity and consistency. Tremendous opportunity, but we need consistency throughout over many, many years.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. And I want to thank our panelists for joining us this afternoon. I think it was a very insightful conversation and enjoyed it very much. And I hope the audience did too. And let's hope for, I think Kent said, steady and boring in the future between the U.S. and China and ag trade. So Rachel, back to you.
Thanks, Jay, for a great job moderating an excellent, excellent panel. And to each of our panelists for a really fantastic exchange. I want to extend a very special thanks to Minister Counselor Ritchie. It's the middle of the night in Beijing, so we appreciate the extra effort you made to be with us today. We've now completed session 2, so we're 2/3 of the way done with our forum today, and we look forward to session 3, where we will be joined by, we have some great speakers, Senator Deb Fischer, Representative Don Bacon, and Mr. Jason Happemeister, who serves as Acting Deputy Undersecretary for Agriculture, for Trade, and Foreign Agricultural Affairs. Their remarks will be followed by a panel on agribusiness, and then our event co-chairs, Mr. Glenn Lau-Key and Mr. Andy Aboud, will wrap up today's dialogue with some closing remarks. So see you in a few minutes for our final session.